Welcome to Rule the World, the art and power of storytelling. Storytelling is what connects us as humans, and for brands, it is no different. A well-told story can effectively position your brand in the minds and hearts of your audience, and can convert thoughts and feelings into results and revenue. On this show, we dive into the unique and recurring principles of world-class storytellers from every walk of life to help you level up your storytelling skills and knowledge to drive real, measurable results for you and your organization. Here's your host, Paul Furlong.
Hello and welcome to Rule the World, the art and power of storytelling. My name is Paul Furlong, creative director at Opus Media, and I imagine you're listening to this podcast because you know the power of storytelling. And I want you to bring that power to your own writing with Roger Shulman at thewritercoach.com. Roger's unique coaching method connects your personal story to whatever you're writing, giving it heart and depth. The result, your presentation, website copy, keynote address or screenplay becomes compelling, entertaining and persuasive. Roger is the winner of a British Academy Award and nominee for the Oscar and the Emmy. So go to thewritercoach.com and schedule a free discovery session. Let Roger bring the Hollywood to your writing. Today's guest is Martin J. Williams of UK Copywriting and the Williams bit of Hampson, Nattan, Williams, experts in tone of voice and messaging. So welcome, Martin.
Hi, Paul.
Thanks for coming along today. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what it is you spend your days doing.
Okay, I live in Manchester. I'm involved in two agencies, UK Copywriting and more Hampson, Nattan, Williams. I've been in Manchester for 10 years. I'm from Cheltenham Spa originally. And we work primarily with tech companies, helping them share their value and impress upon their customers that their expertise, now they can help them be more successful.
And how is it that you do that?
We work as closely as we can with our clients to get to the truth of what's going on, really, most of the time. Our clients have their reasons as to why they think their clients use them and the value they add and the expertise they contribute. We find that when we speak to our clients, we start to get more a clearer picture, really, of the value of our clients' contribution to them and why they use them.
And so why is storytelling important to what you do?
I think storytelling is particularly important to what we do because in the world that we inhabit, primarily technology, you're dealing with technologists, scientifically minded people who are particularly keen on expressing their value in terms of function, often, and functional measurement and performance. So it can all get a bit dry. Facts tell, stories sell, and all that. And I think it's important to add that element of storytelling, really, just to give emotion and reason behind why these products that they develop.
And so, to you just talked about emotion. That's clearly a key element to a good story. So maybe you could expand on that a little bit and talk about what else makes for a good story.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things contribute to making a good story. In the context of B2B web copy, for example, I think a good story should be based on a truth. There should be a true story, and I think it should. There are elements of humanity need to be involved in it. So the way that the technology, for example, will interact with people, will impact on their lives, benefit them. I think a good story also needs plenty of detail as well. It needs to get down to the nitty gritty, and I think that assists the believability of it. So certainly commercially, truth. Detail and people. I'd say those are three primary ingredients. When it comes to, I do public speaking as well. I've got involved in that recently. I've forced myself into doing it. Part of my messages, or part of my the reason I do it is trying to encourage more people to do it. I think it's a really powerful thing to do. I wouldn't be so hard and fast with the rules then about what makes a good publicly spoken story. I think it needs to be primarily useful. I don't think it needs to be true, although it needs to be telling truths. I'm quite at pains actually when I speak to people to say that the copywriting and public speaking are completely different animals. So slightly different rules apply to them, in my opinion.
So you say that a good story has humanity to it. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important to put people in the story so they can relate to what you're saying. I think make the reader the hero in the story, and what. And there will be aspects of their lives, their fears, their loves, their ambitions, their status, their ego, all these very, very human feelings and emotions that you can bring into play by in your storytelling. And I think that's really, really important. Otherwise, it's just very dry and it becomes a very factual exercise. So it's pulling on those emotional strings. I think through addressing issues that that we all as individuals care about and relate to ourselves. There's a copywriting. They say the top things people in commercial copywriting, top three things people care about. And third place is themselves. And second place is themselves, and first place is themselves. So the more you can place someone's self at the centre of a story, emotionally, the more powerful that story will be, the more effective it will be, and the more you'll be able to convey the information you want to, the meaning and the value of the information you want to share by telling the story. So yeah.
And you said that right at the beginning, that you work with your clients to find the stories. So how else do you tend to prepare the stories that you're telling? And what preparation do you do with your clients to find these stories?
So we interview them. I go to great lengths to be able to get the permissions and the access to clients. And I will just go through, I will just essentially walk through a case study scenario, really. So there's, what was the pain you had? What was the problem that you were experiencing in the first place? What did you do to try and resolve it? How did you come across that solution? What was applied how was the resolution applied? And what were the upshots? What were the consequences of it? And would you happily use that same solution again, i.e. my client? So it's just walking through the history of their partnership, really. And because I'm not personally involved and I'm a third party brought in, I get a little bit more license to ask probably more probing questions than my clients may dare ask of their clients. And I think my clients' clients are more relaxed talking to me because they don't have that existing relationship. It's not a day-to-day kind of thing. So it's nice to have a bit of a little bit of a free run of it. You've got to be respectful, but I can talk about money, for example, my clients, whereas my clients might not dare start talking about pounds, shillings and pence savings they've made. I've found some amazing stuff out about software licenses that were being paid and now aren't because the software provisions saved the vast amounts of money that's saved. So it's a very, very valuable way of getting to the true stories behind the relationship.
So it seems like by asking the right questions, you're getting to the heart of the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's fitting it to a simple story arc.
Yeah, so you'll probably notice a theme. So a theme will evolve as you're speaking to somebody, and it just won't be a straight portrayal of this happened and that happened. You'll identify in the relationship and in the problem solving that's happened, a theme, and wrap the whole of the narrative around that particular theme. For example, I was speaking with a client of mine, and after quite a long conversation, they happened to mention the fact that a lot of their work was very sensitive, and what they liked about my client is that they trusted them with their data. So suddenly it becomes the reason. Suddenly we're building a narrative based on trust then, and that you are your data in this day and age. And when you have a third-party provider, you need to be absolutely sure you can trust that provider, with that confidential information. So then we start a discussion then about the value. The theme is data and its value, and how companies these days are largely comprised of their data, and how important that is. So that gives you a little fresh angle in which to position this company's, my client's proposition, that they are trustworthy with data.
And so once you've got the research done and you've got the elements of the story that you're going to build, how do you then carry on that preparation of the story? What's your next step?
Everything's connected, and even if it isn't, it will serve you well to remember that it might be all connected. So nothing is irrelevant or wasteful. And to take aspects of your life and aspects of your interactions with people and conversations you've had and things you've heard and seen, and it's all material. And we've all lived lives, and we can, if we sit down and think about it, I'm sure we can all drag up interesting stories, interesting conversations we've had and scenarios. And the more you start thinking about it, you can start piecing them together. Now, rather than thinking of the end and then trying to find the story in my life, rather than starting with the conclusion, what I want to say, the message, and finding a story to support that message, what I'll often do is work hard at finding, as in the case of this case study with the data, finding the story, what happened, and then apply the meaning to it afterwards. I tell a story about a business venture of mine, which it's quite fun. People find it amusing because it's so horrendously wrong. Selling sunglasses southbound on the M5 in the dampest, darkest, dimmest, dingiest, dullest summer since 1863, and Krakatoa erupted and plunged the Northern Hemisphere into 2 years of almost semi-permanent winter. And it got worse than that. We got moved northbound, so we weren't selling sunglasses to anybody for 3 months in the dullest, dimmest, darkest, because people were on their way back from Cornwall, on their way back from Devon, with their skint, and they were depressed going back to work, and it was raining anyway, so why would they buy sunglasses? And it was a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. The more I reflected on it, the more I realised it actually hadn't been a disaster. Blah, 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 blah. And the value of that, and the story I want to tell there is control the controllables. When you have aspects of your life and your business that are within your control, it makes absolute sense to mitigate against the stuff that's beyond your control, to make the very, very most of them. And that's what. But I only realised that having thought about the story in the first place, and thought, and worked out a narrative and worked all the way through it. It's just a weird shaggy dog story, although it's true. And then thought, well, what's the meaning? What was the meaning of that story? What did it mean? And then you start digging deeper and thinking more about it. You apply the meaning to it, and I think that applies with commercial writing as well. And he's into these cases. When I speak to my clients, I think it's a very useful approach for me, rather than taking the end point, starting with the end point, and trying to construct a story to get there. I'll construct a story, then work out in my own mind what it meant.
And in that sunglasses story that you've just told, you used a lot of alliteration. So how important is language in the stories that you tell?
It's utterly essential, I think, in the engagement, in the emotional response people have to your storytelling. And I think it doesn't just. I mean, some people are incredibly gifted. For me, I have to work. I work hard at it to craft, to construct. Using the right, adding life to a metaphor, making it interesting, not just using a cliche, and working on the presentation of the story. I think is really important as well. There are devices. There are lots of devices we all use. Rhetorical devices, I think, are fabulously powerful and effective and much underappreciated. There's a book by Mark Forsyth called The Elements of Eloquence. Can't recommend it highly enough. It basically works through the ancient Greek rhetorical devices and gives contemporary examples like the Beatles and Kennedy and Shakespeare, to show you how they're embedded in our language and in our psyche, and we don't even know it half the time, and they're incredibly powerful. For example, I'll give you a quick example. Everyone's familiar with alliteration. Curiosity killed the cat. I mean, you see it in advertising and you see it in conversation every day. You see the nonsense that's spoken because it alliterates, and rhyme as well. The amazing stuff that people can get away with just because something rhymes, but it's soft on the ear, it's natural on the ear, and it disarms you, and it slips under the logic radar often, and it adds lots and lots of colour as well. I'll give you another example of something. The tricolon, the power of three: blood, sweat, and tears. Education. Of all the gin joints in all the towns, in all the world. It's such a powerful device. And we use them naturally, and we use them intuitively. And I think, if you want to get really, really good at this, grab that book, work through it all, and you'll be amazed at how common these ancient devices are. And how very difficult lots of them are to pronounce as well. Your question was language.
Yeah. How important it is.
I think it's the rocket fuel in the tank.
And I've read some of what you've written in the past, and you have a very particular style. Or in the things that I've read, I think I would be able to tell that that's something that Martin has written. So, how have you developed that style?
Well, I'm a songwriter. My background is as a songwriter, and I had to take songwriters take you creating great big ideas and distilling them into 3 verses, a bridge, chorus, and a middle eight. However. So I love doing that, and I think that probably reflects in my writing. I'm not sure how clever that is, and in many respects, what you said about being able to identify my writing as mine, professionally, probably isn't something I'd want to crow about, because you have a company's tone of voice is a company's tone of voice. We work very, very hard at eliciting our client's tone of voice. And then making it consistent, projecting it across all their sort of marketing touch points. And I have to work very hard. I'm aware I have a style, and I have to work very, very hard at being professional and working to consistently represent my clients in the tone of voice that they need to be represented. But from my personal point, my personal writing style is very, very conversational, for want of a better term, and quite poetic as well. I think I write with a lot of poetry. I love playing with sounds of words and things like alliteration, and playing with sentence lengths, and just that's what I like to read. It engages me, it stimulates me, and I guess that's what what you like influences what you do. So how do you
You mentioned about the tone of voice of the client is important, and to maybe sometimes get away from your own style to find the client's style.
Absolutely, yeah.
How do you do that?
We run workshops. We've got a tone of voice workshop. We've got a toolkit, and we sit down with our clients and we basically start a conversation, and we set off conversations. We trigger conversations between our client stakeholders. So we get 4 or 5 client stakeholders in a room, and we'll just give them the tools basically to do their own investigation, and it's guided, and we enter to the point where we will help them with this toolkit. We will 11 primary voices. There are 11 primary voices based on Jung's archetypes, essentially. It's a sort of commercial version of it, real world commerce version of it, and the workshop helps our clients elicit, define, understand, reveal their own. It exists. The process helps them identify what it is, and we'll create a set of guidelines for them, so they can go away and their marketing team can write in that agreed. Because what's nice about the workshop is the buy-in. Everyone's there, everyone's contributing to it, and it's a shared decision. Because that's really, really important. It's the consistency of a company tone of voice is very, very powerful. So we'll create guidelines off the back of that, and their team can write it, or we'll write the copy ourselves on behalf of them, or train them to do whatever they want, really. But it all starts with tone of voice, and then we build the messaging on top of that. And it's the messaging that needs to come first.
Do you want to talk us through the toolkit or the archetypes?
Yes, I can do that. So what we do is we've got a load of cards with individual words on them. So we'll lay the cards out on the table. For example, frank will be a word. Flamboyant will be another word. Concrete will be another word. We've got 98 of them. And we'll ask our clients to pick. Say there's 5 stakeholders in the room. Say pick 5 each, and 2 you think do not reflect the way the projection and the perception of your company. So off they'll go, and it's great to sit back and watch people fight over cards. Oh, but I was going to know, why have you chosen that? It's ridiculous. And we just sit, let this thing unfolds, and it takes quite an amount of time, and we'll assist where needs be. And aren't those 2 cards similar? Why? And a client might justify the choice of those 2 similar cards, or agree that they are too similar, and yes, they'll just keep one. We'll end up with 25 cards that they've chosen, 5 each, and 3 that are definitely not them, and we'll whittle it down. We'll let them negotiate with each other, compare, contrast, compete, and down to maybe 5 core cards that they feel represent. And all the time we're interrogating, we're asking them questions, we're making them justify. And the whole process is an amazing conversation, and you start seeing light bulbs go off, and people, because what it does is the process gives people a license, really, a platform to actually think about the language they use and how they should be using. It gives real, genuine value to language and the words they feel might represent them. So we'll do that. We'll end up with 5. Okay, that's great. It's really interesting. And then we'll show them the archetypes written in the style of the archetypes. For example, these are commercially relevant. For example, fire starter is quite bullish, quite full on. Think Brewdog as a brand, or what's a playful child is one that's a bit gooey and a bit, think innocent. So there are, storyteller. I mean, the times I've spent on a tube station platform in London reading the Jack Daniels advert on the opposite wall. There's a perfect example of storytelling. So what, based on the cards they've chosen, we'll work out, because brands are rarely a single tone, there'll be a blend. We'll, based on the cards they've chosen, that they themselves, we haven't told them what to choose. There's cards, each individually relates to a primary tone of voice. So they will reflect the blend that they are. And it's very, very powerful and very liberating, I think, because there you've got it. You've got your tone of voice defined. You've got your guidelines off the back of that. We'll give them a certificate. So you are purposeful with a dash of warm friend and a little bit of straight talker. And because everyone's been involved in the process, there's that buy-in, and that level of consistency across the whole company has been agreed. So every time, from now on, every touch point on the user journey should be addressed in that consistent tone. And we've done it for Hampson, Nattan, Williams on my purposeful straight talkers, which reins me back from this kind of quite poetic, lyrical style that I would write normally for my business, which is a good thing, because it means the three of us have that defined tone of voice, and when we communicate, it's much more consistent. It's not three individuals just chucking any kind of weird writing into the hat. We've got that things, and it's an amazing starting point for any business. I think it's incredibly powerful. People talk about tone of voice all the time. Tone of voice this, tone of voice that. No one applies it in the way that we do with our toolkit. It's been codified, and we make it very, very clear. It's a bit abstract normally, but we make it very, very clear for people. And you'll get a set of brand guidelines when you walk into a company. Half an inch thick, Pantone colours and pixels and distance from the edge of a page, all this kind of stuff. You'll get a couple of lines at the end, right? Like you talk, keep your sentences short, and that's it. Our process just adds a lot more depth to that, really. For example, so when you get a marketing company involved or a PR company, you can say to them, or a new member of staff, or a new branch, whatever, boom, there you go. This is how we talk. And here are examples, and here are, just keeps it consistent.
Fascinating. Love it. So Martin, can you tell me a little bit about how you might grab attention at the start of a story?
I think a single word is a very powerful way to begin a story. Juxtaposition, surprise. I'm a big Seth Godin fan, and he talked. I did this marketing seminar a couple of years ago. He talked about storytelling and that. I don't know if this is related to your previous question or not, but I'd like to share it because I think it's useful. He talks about two types of stories. He talks about, I used to think that, then this happened, and now I think this. And I think that's a really, really, especially as we were talking commercially, really, really powerful way of telling a story. And when you build in empathy and humility and trust and tension, he uses status. He thinks status is a really powerful thing. I think that makes it. There's a fantastically famous headline. I think it ran for 40 years. It was controlled. It couldn't be beaten for 40 years. It was a home music tuition course, and they laughed when I sat down at the piano. But when I started to play, and that headline was unbeaten for 40 years, because it is that I used to think piano lessons were boring. And then I realised that people were really impressed by people who could play the piano. And as a result, I went and got my piano lessons and now play the piano really well and impress people. So that's a very concise and powerful story, just in a sentence. You're a person who's struggling with something, and someone teaches you something, and there you are. There's another storytelling. I don't know. Tell me if I'm going on. It talks about Marshall Gant's method. The story of self, the story of us, the story of now. A lot of political organisations use that. It's a very, very powerful vehicle. I'm going to share a URL in the notes I wish I could remember the name of the person who told it. It's a YouTube video of a guy telling equal rights campaigner talking using the self, us, and now framework. Storytelling is beautiful and wonderfully powerful. So that's what we're looking at.
And so, just going back to grab attention, I suppose those elements that you've talked about there will help to hold attention. Would you say, kind of keeping the middle section of the story, keeping people engaged?
Yeah, I think the best way of grabbing attention is putting them straight in the story from the off. So the sunglasses story, to go back to that as an example, I say, what were you doing in the summer of 2008? Do you remember the summer of 2008? And people, was there anything notable about the summer of 2008? People say, the Beijing Olympics. The economic crash. I say, yeah. I don't care about that. That doesn't suit the purposes of my narrative, I'm afraid. I'm going to tell you. So you're engaged in, what were you doing? Do you remember where you were in the summer of 2008? You might have been in a different city. There's people are racking their brains. They're engaged. They're part of the story now. And off we go. And I think that's a very powerful starting point. And I think scene setting as well, literal scene setting, is another story I tell. About Christmas Eve, Christmas night, around some friends' house playing Trivial Pursuit. Everyone's played Trivial Pursuit. Everyone can relate to that, can't they? So I got the green. We got the green. What's the green? It's a science. Yeah. So you're asking people, and of course everyone knows it's science. So they're cheap tricks, really, but it's getting people involved. The people we were with, and you name them. With little Luke, his girlfriend, Jo, she's a nice girl. They got this green question. That's the science, I think. Yeah. And the question was, what is 100 times sweeter than cane sugar? And off you go. And it tells a story. And it generally happened as a story, and I didn't know what it meant at the time. It just made me laugh for about 12 years. And at the end after 12 years, I reflected on it. I thought, actually, there was meaning in that story, and then applied. And then it justified telling it as a story, then, not just as a madman's ramblings.
And so, as well as kind of the Seth Godin and the Marshall Gantz method that you're talking about, how else can we keep people engaged in the middle of the story?
How else can we keep people engaged? Put them at the centre of the story, you mean?
Yeah, often, particularly maybe when you're hearing people talk on the stage, and I know certainly in movies, in books that I've read, it's always the middle of the story where people tend to switch off.
Oh, right, okay.
So how can we keep people engaged in the middle of a story?
The middle of the story is that bit when everything's gone wrong, isn't it? Where the hero's journey and all that, isn't it? Where they have their mentor and their. I think humour. I think surprise. Steven Pinker. I like Steven Pinker a lot. I think he's great. You're familiar with him? He's a neuropsychologist, whatever his official title is. He's got an amazing book called The Sense of Style. And I'm a big fan. And he says, all good writing balances clarity and surprise. So I think chucking in surprise, curveballing people, I think is a really great thing to do. And I'll tell you, you're going to ask me later, probably, who my favourite storytellers are. Well, I'm going to let the cat out of the proverbial sack now. Stuart Lee, the comedian, I just think is a consummate storyteller because he takes you down paths with clarity and plausibility. And then he'll just chuck you off a cliff. and they'll just completely screw you over. And that surprise, I think, is really, really powerful because it keeps you engaged. As a marketer, I don't know if you find this, Paul, but as a marketer, my purpose is to do anything I can in my power to stop people's eyes glazing over, and they're very, very quick to do so, in day-to-day life. And I think surprise and discomfort. Even I'd go as far as say a little bit of discomfort and a little bit of surprise is the way to do it. Break people out of their inertia. So I think that in the middle of a story, when people think they've got you sussed, they've got the whole thing worked out, and you just say to them, a reveal perhaps, some sort of reveal. I see dead people. But that wouldn't work in the middle in that case, would it? But
So you did beat me to it. My next question was going to be the first of the quick-fire questions at the end, which is, who do you think of when you hear the word story, and why? So you've mentioned one. Who else, and why do you think that about them when you hear the word story?
Okay. I love Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's called magical realism. For me, the whole process of reading his work is magical. I don't know what's real, what's supposedly real. It's fiction, isn't it? But I don't know what's supposed to be portrayed as real, what isn't. I find that really beautiful. I love George Orwell. I think they say if you want to understand the 20th century, read George Orwell. And it isn't just 1984. I mean, it's an epic interrogation of British society in the 30s, as wrote to Wikipedia. Down there, perhaps not just brilliant. Not embellished, it's not flowery. It's just great writings. It's very easy to read. I think Seth Godin tells great stories as well. He's consummate. Charles Dickens, I just think is just a great read. My favourite book, I don't know if you mean, I love a book called Vernon God Little. I think it won some big award in the early 2000s. That just moves me, that book. Yeah. I like writing that. I think, God, how do you do that? I think like music is not anything. You can't work it out. You can't see the moving parts. And it's like, God, you aspire to it. And that I find that, guess what? I find that inspirational. You know what I mean?
And can you recommend any good books or blogs or videos or anything that will make us better storytellers?
I think there's a brilliant blog. I get this daily thing. There's a couple of things, yeah. Hugh MacLeod, Gaping Void, I think is the name of his company. They do sort of a graphic and a bit of business or life truth beneath it. And I think that's really, really beautiful. I enjoy getting those. I'll have a quick look at those daily. At the risk of sounding like a Seth Godin fanboy, his blog is just a shot of inspiration most of the time, and helps. It just helps. It helps give. It gave me the courage to realise that you could explain stuff in a conversational one-to-one, years ago. And I think that's what a lot of people need, and I think that's why our tone of voice workshop's great. And I think that's why public speaking's great, because you're working in this environment where it's okay, it's permissible to write like you speak, and to just to converse on a one-to-one basis, to break away from the legalese, the light legalese that a lot of businesses have traditionally used or increasingly going away from. I think read any Stuart Lee you can. That's just it's as funny as it is informative. It's another blog I subscribe to. It's a weekly email, and it's from an American academic called Dr. Mardy. And again, that is just a massive burst of inspiration and education and insight into other people's thinking, and you sit there and you compare it to yours, and it just makes you a more informed participant of this wonderful game we're all playing. He's got a book called Metaphors Be With You, which made me laugh.
And where can we find out more about you online, whatever you might be up to in the next year or so?
Okay, got a very, very busy year ahead. Hampson, Nattan, Williams is taking off really well with the tone of voice stuff, our message-led marketing. So that's going great. Because it's nice to be able to get in with businesses earlier in the marketing process as opposed to just be dragged in last minute, like a lot of traditionally. Yeah, we're basically Hampson, Nattan, Williams are three businesses, competitors. We had the same problems. We were getting dragged in. Can you replace this lorem ipsum, please? We just had spent vast amounts of money having a website designed, and then we realised we needed some words quick. Let's find some writers. And so what's happening now is that we're getting involved in the marketing conversations a lot earlier when we're talking about tone of voice, and it just gives us much more influence and much more value to the work we can deliver, and it helps our clients loads because it's going to makes the whole messaging that much stronger. So loads of that going on. We're putting a conference on in June the 7th, Friday the 7th, I think, at the Royal Exchange. That's planned for. We've got some amazing speakers, storytellers, copywriting based marketeers, content people. It's going to be astonishing. So we've a lot of work going into that at the moment. And
website, social media,
HNW Agency, or UK Copywriting. Yeah, you'll find me or us through there. Trying to start fires, basically. Trying to have conversations. We just want as many interesting conversations where we can share our knowledge and we can learn stuff. And, we're all, it's all good.
Brilliant. Well, Martin, it's been great having you on today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. I look forward to doing this again sometime soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Rule the World. Be sure to rate, review and subscribe to the show, and visit weareopusmedia.com for more resources based on today's topic, as well as access to more episodes that will help you develop your storytelling abilities. That's weareopusmedia.com. Thank you, and see you next time.